Thanks so much for being here. I know that it's always popular to start talking while everyone is eating. Um, as you are finishing up, having a bite to eat, we do want to give you a quick reminder about the process tonight. You've probably noticed that the poster boards, the sheets that are around the room, we do want you to get up, walk around, take a look at these sheets. This is what all the working groups have been spending a great deal of time on. So the three main things that we want you to notice is the process the group used, what they kept, and what they have put aside. So if you can focus on those three things as you're taking a browse around the room, because eventually what we want to start looking at are commonalities, are there emerging themes that stretch across. That doesn't have to be there, but that's some of the things that we're going to be looking at, we want to start discussing. Again, that there is still part of the creative process that is happening now. So we want to be able to talk about that tonight. We're going to have you get in other groups eventually, share with each other what did you go through, and start discussing what you see on the poster board. So I do want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here tonight. We absolutely want to respect your time, so we're going to be very aware of where we are and to keep the process moving. A special thanks to Julia McDonald for helping us get all of this organized. And I would like to ask President Caboni if he would please come up here, and I believe he has some members of the external group that he would like to introduce. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Paula. As we've said on several occasions, this is not my process, it's your process. But I do want to welcome and thank the volunteers who are going to be part of our external relations, whatever we've called, philanthropy and external relations group. And so Randy Shoemaker, who is the chair of the WKU Foundation board, is here with us tonight. And Mike Simpson, who is the chair of the College Heights Foundation board, have graciously agreed to co-chair the group. But Randy, would you stand up and introduce yourself, and then would the other members of the working group introduce yourselves as well, and thank you all for being here. There is a roving microphone somewhere. Julia McDonald is quickly making her way over with it. We have two.
There we go. All right. Randy Shoemaker, recently retired from Logan Aluminum. I've worked there the last 12 years, and before that I worked in oil and chemical business for British Petroleum for 27 years. So a lot of manufacturing background. I am currently the chairman of the WKU Foundation right now, and we've been in Bowling Green for 13 years and love it here and our affiliation with the university. Thank you.
Andy Burt, president of Hilltopper Athletic Foundation. I've been Old Western alumni, dentist here in Bowling Green for the last 20 years, and one of the team physicians.
Larry Cash, I've been the executive director of the Hilltopper Athletic Foundation for the last couple of years. I've been here in Bowling Green with WKU for the last 4 years as well, and excited to work with this group.
I didn't know I'd get to stand up and say all these good things. Hi, I'm Carol Wedge, and I'm co-chair of the College Heights Foundation, and delighted to be here and see a lot of new faces. I've heard of you but never really met you before, so I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And I'm Donald Smith. I work with the College Heights Foundation, been at the university for 24 years, and a 1994 alumnus of WKU.
And John Paul Blair, 92 graduate, have been back here for 20 years and representing philanthropy and alumni engagement.
And is Deanna Mills, are you on the telephone? On the remote web. Deanna, can you talk to us, or is it just, how does that work? No, she can't talk to us. Well, Deanna, I will introduce you, is on the remote web from Atlanta, and where she works there in telecom, and also is serving this year as president of the WKU Alumni Association. So, Deanna, we're happy to have you joining us electronically. And so that's the members of our sixth and final working group, and I look forward to being part of the conversation this evening. Thank you, Paul and Bruce, for organizing this, and I'm very excited to see flip charts and stickers and note cards. It's going to make for a fun evening.
Thank you so much. A reminder that eventually we'll be passing that remote mic around. Please make sure that it is on so that can be recorded, and with this streaming, that what you have to say will be heard by those that are viewing. So let me, while you're finishing up, let me tell you just a little bit again about this complete process tonight. This was on the agenda, so it's something that you have seen before. As I mentioned earlier, in just a few minutes, we want you to take some time to walk around, look at everyone's flip charts, and then we also want to have a co-chair from each group, or both co-chairs, respond to questions that any of you may have. We're really going to be very cognizant of the time, because those will just be some general brief questions, and then we're going to have a breakout session. So basically what we'll do is we'll ask you to count off from 1 to 12, and then all of the ones will get together, and we'll have a way to help you get you organized. All the twos will get together, 3, and so on. And so that's when you'll have more of the discussion within that table and group about what went on in the process, and then are there commonalities that you see in emerging themes. And this is, again, a good time to get ideas from other people. We have time, and so we're wanting you all to be able to free to talk and to discuss and to share ideas. So then we'll put you back in your own working groups, and have kind of a summary of what we have looked at, found tonight, and then we'll start looking forward. We're taking a look at next week. We had mentioned that this would be a good week, since it's the last full week before Thanksgiving, to do things like data collection. We're going to have an open forum. So those type of things we want to start getting in order to get us ready and prepared for our next meeting that's on December the 6th. So that's where we would like to go tonight, and where we're hoping to go in the future. So that being said, if the majority of you feel like you are ready to just start getting up and taking a tour around, let's do that for a few minutes, and then we'll start with our next part of the meeting. Thank you. If you'll take just a few more minutes to make sure that you get to every poster, and then we can move on to the next step, please.
How many tables do we have? 1, 2, 3. We won't have quite. But there's 5 groups. So there's only 5 people to a group, right? Like there's only going to be 5 ones. So they just have to find a place to sit together or talk to. Yeah, there'll be 12 groups of 5 rather than 5 groups of 12. Ballpark.
All right. As we're finishing up both eating and reading, and if you're the one with the 4,000 words on their flip charts, and I guess we have to blame that on Harold. That's what Rob told me, because he's not here. What we're going to ask you to do now is if you'll go back to your group table that you started with, and for the new group, if you guys want to play, you're welcome to, or you can just over there and devise ways to make more money for Western. Either one works. If you would count off in your table 1 through the number that are there, so that each one of you has a unique number beginning with 1, and there's probably no more than about 12 of you. Steering committee, you don't have to do this because you're going to be the fill-in. If all the ones would get together from each of the different tables. So right now we have approximately 5 tables of 12. We want to basically get 12 groups of 5, if that makes sense. Got it? Math is, what is it, Bruce? Math is what? All right, so do your counting, and then will all the ones, what? We're going to do that after the discussion rather than before, so we don't get on a soapbox. Could all the ones come up and grab this and go find a place to sit? All the ones, go there. Okay, the 2s, go to Cheryl, and then you guys are going to have to find some place to go that you can talk. The 3s go to Neil. So come up here from your table and then find a place to go sit. You're welcome to use any of the seats over here as well, since we don't have a big audience tonight. All right, so you should all be with the same number group. Neil's got a 3 up. He's looking for more 3s. What we would like you to discuss is what you just read. Any group, as you get into the bigger numbers, if you're lacking someone from a particular committee, please let us know, and a steering committee member will join you who has visited with that committee. If you've got 5, you've probably got everybody. If you've got 5 in your group, you probably have everybody, unless someone's creating committees. 12s are over here to the right, stage right. Steering committee members are welcome to listen in, to join a group for a little bit and then leave. You're welcome to interact with any of these groups and just kind of be a fly on the wall, or you're welcome to just hang out. Michael, what number are you? 11? 10?
So one of the things that I want to remind everybody in your groups, and by the way, you did a beautiful job getting into your groups, you're basically talking about, okay, what did you see in terms of the process that the group used? What did they keep? What did they throw away? But then also, do you see any commonalities? Okay, so are there themes that seem to be common within the groups that you find? Also, what are the big ideas? Because that's what we're eventually trying to get to. So about 20 minutes on this part of the process. We'll remind you when about 10 minutes are left, okay? Thanks. Okay. What was your name? Paula? Potter. For this particular steering committee, we are, Bruce Schulte and I are co-chairs of the steering committee. You're just about halfway through, so keep those conversations going.
I've told a few groups that we'll just call on them to say one of the things, not all the things. So that's probably what we should plan out now. Like, 'cause maybe we don't want to do 1, 2, 3, say this, you know, like. Maybe what we do, why don't we give them this? Why don't we give them a chance?
Okay, we would like to give each group an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you just have been discussing. So how we would like to do this is just for the next couple of minutes within your group, decide what you would like to share with the larger group in terms of, do you see a commonality? So that's one thing. Okay? You can also talk about the process used. Or things that you might like to see come back. So, of the three things that you talked about, choose one of them, and then we'll give each group an opportunity to talk about that one thing, because we're thinking that there may be some commonalities. So if you can take just the next couple of minutes, decide what it is that you would like to share with the rest of the group. It can be any of the three things that you talked about. Questions? Okay. Okay. We're going to make this really easy and start with the group that has the mic. So if you would please, when it's your group's turn, if you could just say your group number, it just is going to help us keep up with, what we heard from each group. So, wonderful. I see that. And the name of the spokesperson, please. And so, floor is yours.
Hi, we're the twos. And so we noticed a lot of I'm Christian Ryan. Hi all, I'm your sustainability coordinator, but not for this purpose. For this purpose, I'm the co-chair of the budgeting efficiency and infrastructure group, thank you. So one of the commonalities, we found several themes throughout the different groups, but one of the commonalities that we particularly found interesting was this idea of breaking down silos, making better connections, understanding what we're all doing here, and how all of those things contribute to student success. And so one of the things that we were talking about is the organizational structure. So currently the organizational structure of our university looks something like a pyramid. It's shaped sort of command and control. And when you look at that organizational structure, you have to ask yourself, where are the students? Where are the students in that structure? And if you're looking for the students in that structure, they're hard to find. And if they're there, they're at the bottom, which means that our students are navigating through layers and silos to get their educational experience. And so one of the things that we all agreed on that helps break down the silos, that helps us all work more connectedly together, is an organizational structure that puts students at the middle and arranges everything around students, focusing in on students instead of our students reaching out, going out, looking for all of the things that they need to be successful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you. Wait. I have to say this one thing. Also, we're being too safe. We need to think much, much bigger. Like, the ideas aren't big enough, we all decided.
We're 7. We also noticed about the silos, lack of collaboration. Oh, Kelly Madole, sorry. Silos, lack of collaboration across units. But one thing we talked about in terms of process, at least among this group here, was, and I think this echoes what Ryan said at the end, Christian said at the end, which is that it was hard to come up with goals that weren't just going to make people happy right now, but that are looking forward to doing things that we could move towards that might make people unhappy right now. And so to be aspirational might mean that some people don't like our goal statement, and that's a difficult thing to work around.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Carol Lowry. So we also discussed the silos and duplicate efforts within the university. Oh, we're number 4. And another thing we talked about was kind of trying to find an identity. So one thing that they talked about a lot in student success was, what does it mean to be a WKU student? And they had a lot of trouble figuring out what that meant. We talked a lot about how we have a lot of students going home on the weekends, and there's kind of a little bit of a lack of community. And that was one thing we also talked about in research was, what does it mean to be an applied research university, and just things like that. So trying to find an identity that we can promise all students that they will have once they are here and once they leave here is something that we saw throughout all the groups.
Great, thank you. Name and group number, please.
Beth Lavis, and we're group number 6. And we had some excellent conversation about our struggles with definitions. So we struggle with what student success means, what applied research means to our university, and what is academic excellence. What does that mean for us? We struggle with this because there's such a wide variation of those ideas across our campus. How do we coalesce that into one thing? And that's the thing that we struggle with the most.
Great, thank you.
Is this on? I'm Brad Wheeler, Budget Infrastructure Committee. And we're group number 5, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Forget it in a minute. We talked about several things that are quite important to the institution, we believe. We discussed a little bit of the difference between what applied research and applied learning is, and there was some consistency among group members that applied learning was more relevant to more greater parts of the university. And so I thought that was an interesting consensus because research applies to your STEM direction, but you've got broader academic activities that take place that deal with more applied learning. So I thought that was a really interesting comment. We're very interested, or general consensus of important that we train and capitalize on our intellectual capacity as an institution. We do have, faculty members and staff that are well educated, and how do we capitalize on that as an institution? And we also, Kay brought up some really interesting points in regard to some guiding principles that we ought to consider as an institution, that our decisions should be practical, inclusive, and we should provide personalized education to our students. And so I thought those were quite interesting, relevant discussions that took place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Tugas, group numbers 11 and 12 and extras. We certainly touched on silos, recognize that as a common theme, but we really focused on inclusion, that inclusivity needs to be pervasive across campus, that students are more successful when they feel like they're a part of a group as a whole. And talking specifically examples that Cheryl was giving on cohorts and the success that they've seen in pulling students together in cohorts and letting them work together through the classes or living learning communities, other examples where if we create a culture of caring on campus where students can bond with other students and faculty and staff, that they can be more successful in the long run.
Thank you.
Greg Arbuckle, and we're number 1. We hit on several of the same topics that most people did, especially with the silos and inclusiveness. But the other thing that we had was making WKU a campus destination of students, making it the students' first destination of choice instead of a later choice down the line, and making sure that all students have a sense of belonging at WKU as they're going through, and allowing the budget to right-size itself as we go through this process.
Great, thank you.
We're group number 3, and I am Brianna Harris. So we talked about several things that are actually been pretty much mentioned already. But we talked about establishing an identity for WKU that is clearly articulated to prospective students, current students, alumni, the whole WKU family, essentially. We talked about stopping the runaround for students, creating a one-stop shop that doesn't cause a student to go from one place to another place to another place, ending up being frustrated with the institution and potentially, decreasing our retention rates. And then we talked about breaking down barriers and decreasing silos at the institution as well between colleges and departments, and just encouraging collaboration through incentives.
Thank you.
That dovetails nicely into what we talked about. My name's Dawn Hall, and we are group 8, and we had a fabulous conversation. Oh, we're also 10? Okay, so we're 8 and 10. So we had a great conversation, and then we ended up writing a summary statement. So I'll start with a summary statement and then talk a little bit about what we found in common and kind of where our discussion went. So our summary statement kind of echoes a lot of what's been said already. Rewards, recognition, and incentives need to be aligned with institutional mission of student success, so across faculty and staff. The themes and commonalities we noticed are a lot of what you've all said: student-centered, cultural competency, caring of all kinds, incentives, innovation, and rewarding those things, efficiency, partnerships. We notice words like collaboration, cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, and limiting silos, which has been said quite a bit. So our conversation led us to a lot about frameworks of evaluations and incentivizing, rewarding, student-centered, initiatives. And we talked about setting our priorities first, then reallocating budgets, because we talked about where are the resources going to be to have these big ideas happen. That was a concern. All of us had thought that independently in our own groups. And I guess I'll end on making sure my group thinks I've covered everything, on the idea that we need a transparent evaluation framework. The idea we need to overhaul faculty and staff evaluations so they focus on student success. So that would be, I guess that's a pretty big idea. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
I'm Martha Sales, we're Group 9. We also shared the same thing with silos. We need to take the red out of the red tape. We also talked about that WKU needs to create a thriving environment for not only students, but also faculty and staff. And we also decided that many of our groups had a hard time throwing out anything, not a whole lot of boldness. And so we, group number 9, decided we need to do some things afraid. Take the fear off the table, take the handcuffs off, because we've been given that opportunity, and do it afraid.
Thank you. All the groups, okay? All right, so with that in mind and still keeping in mind what you discussed in your smaller groups, we're now going to go back to your original working group, so we'll give you a few minutes to get back there. We want to make sure that you have food so that we can stay focused.
Thank you. We'll do a Q&A.
Test.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is a little bit of Q&A. So the first working group over here has a mic. This is a chance for, I have to get the names right, academic. Okay, so this is a chance for anybody that wants to ask a question of academic innovation and excellence. To do so, just stand up and I will hand you the mic. You have one too, so wherever you happen to be. So Kristen has, so we'll do this for each group, and it doesn't have to be a co-chair that answers the question, but if you start to hear the same question, don't ask that question. But we'll do a few questions for each group.
Can you elaborate on eliminate colleges?
That was Harold's idea. Harold's in New Orleans right now, eliminating a lot of things, I suspect. Yeah, I mean, that was I think that was, I scoffed at that idea myself because I love my dean and I didn't want him to lose his job. But I think that was really kind of code for breaking down barriers. I mean, that would be a very radical thing for us to do. I mean, I know maybe we want to be radical. That would certainly create some healthy chaos and anarchy maybe that out of which we may get great energy. But I mean, from my perspective, that was sort of code for trying to work together more, make connections across colleges, across disciplines in particular. We were big into interdisciplinary work and trying to build connections among different groups. So, anything else? All right. I think that's what Harold meant. Barbara?
I'll ask you an easier one.
Good.
You mentioned identification of untapped audiences as an important part. I wonder if you could elaborate a little on that.
Do you want to talk about that one? Because you talked about that a lot.
Being on a regional campus, we see in Glasgow, you know, we do have some traditional students that, you know, they're excellence, but their means are limited, so they come to us. But what we see are a lot of folks that are out there in the workforce, for example, who we know would like to come back to school, but we currently do not have the types of programs, and they're not all looking for technical programs. We don't have the types of delivery, and delivery includes scheduling, and of course, you know, the cost. The tuition's always an issue, but we believe there are a lot of untapped audiences out in the region that we haven't looked at. We tend to focus at WKU on that 18 to 22-year-old population, but there are a whole lot more populations out there that we can be serving.
One more question, if anybody else has one for this group. Anybody else?
I hope I'm picking on the right group. I think I am. One thing I think I saw on your sheet was we shouldn't be everything for everybody.
Yes.
And I hear that a lot, but I don't know what it means. And I'd really like some specific examples of that, if you could.
I think it means kind of coming up with what our identity is going to be, and it's the challenge is finding that sweet spot for me in between, you know, being so narrow that you can only attract a small audience and being so broad that you can't do anything particularly well. I mean, from my perspective, that's what this whole activity is built to do, is to try to figure out what our identity is going to be for the next 10 years or so. So from my perspective anyway, it's kind of a work in progress. That may be a cop-out answer, I don't know.
We're going to move to the next group. So diversity, equity, and inclusion. Any questions there?
One of the things that you put on your poster was that budget allocation would
would reflect your achieved desired outcomes. And so my question is, what types of things would you, if you were given extra budget allocation, what kind of things would you put it for to make the university more inclusive?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that question. Where shall we begin? We shall begin, if you think about any initiative that we're going to implement relative to cultural competency or cultural humility, because that's a contested term in the literature right now, it's going to require resources in order to do that. Right off the bat, it's going to require some resources for that. Currently, we have offices that are focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they are woefully underfunded. Now, mind you, we're used to doing things with, we're used to making bricks without straw, so we make it work. But nevertheless, there are programmatic initiatives that should be set in motion that we need funding for that. If you think about being able to couple several things together, let's look at high impact practices, for instance, and rewarding our faculty and staff who are involved with implementing high impact practices, whether it's in the classroom or even outside of the classroom, because we know that those initiatives in particular help us retain all students, but particularly underrepresented minoritized students. Shall I go on? When we think about a marketing strategy, going back to what we were just talking about relative to what are the audiences that we're missing? Recruitment strategies that are zeroing in on the students that we want here. I mean, we want them, but the ones that we really, really want here, and being able to offer scholarships and incentivize them coming here. So there's dozens and dozens of things that, and in fact, the other thing too, I think that DEI should be a part of everyone's working group. I think it's imperative that it be there. And I'm glad to see that in the preliminary work, as we're beginning to crystallize our direction, that we're talking about inclusivity and we're talking about a caring place and we're talking about those things, but DEI should be a component of every single part of our strategic planning process.
Anyone else with another question for them? Okay, since we didn't, Andy, I'm going to give you a chance to go back to the other group and ask your question.
So mine is largely based on what was said by Dr. Maddle earlier, when it says that we can't be everything to everybody. But I also wondered, because in section of threats on number 7, it also discussed WKU's reputation. So I guess I was wondering what you specifically meant by this, especially in reference to everything to everybody. Because if we're still trying to define our identity, what are these aspects of our reputation that we don't wish to sacrifice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we need to figure out. I mean, what are the, maybe I'm not understanding your question, but if it's about, what are the programs that we're particularly good at, or what are our particular strengths historically, what are we good at? We'd probably, ask 60 people in the room and get 60 different answers, maybe, or maybe there'd be 40. Mm-hmm. But what are those key areas that we think we're best at? Is that, maybe I'm misunderstanding though?
Yes, could you give some, examples about what you all specifically meant by reputation, like specific areas? Or was this more of an individual definition as you referenced?
Could you ask your question again?
So just individual examples of something that constitutes our reputation.
So one of the things we did is we did a SWOT analysis, and WKU has a strong reputation of a school that no matter where you go in the nation, if you say you're alumni of WKU, that comes with a strong reputation of being high quality. And the threat is the possibility of losing that reputation. That's something we don't want to do. So yeah, that's all that was.
So it was discussing the university as a whole. There's no individual programs?
No, it's university as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. We're going to move to budget, because why not? Question for budget. No one cares about money. That's always nice. Yvonne?
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay. For the budget committee, it seemed like a lot of it was about like a culture of caring, shared resources. And I was on the Senate a few years ago, or for quite a long time, and it came up several years ago that as tuition increased for students, what our students looked like changed. Who can afford to come here, in other words. And so I wondered if that came up in your committee. We talked a little bit about it in our number 5 group over here, and if that could come up in some way, because when we're talking about diversity and other campuses, it's true here too on the main campus that who we are is really who our students are. So who can come here based on what they can afford as tuition keeps increasing.
I'll take a shot in the dark there. Okay, so that absolutely did. Affordability is a serious issue, I think, for any institution. But WKU, as any tuition increases, then the number of people that can actually afford it decreases. Generally speaking, or the affordability, the ability to get aid, scholarships offered, or anything like that. You're not always going to have enough resources to provide for all of the students that would like to attend our institution and everything like that. So I think that that's something that's kind of come up with a bunch of different groups here. I think what we're looking at is we've specifically talked about a student-centered approach, where if we're going to be having these students pay these tuition, we're going to have tuition continue to increase, then we need to make sure that we're servicing the students to the best of our ability. That means sharing resources. That means decreasing maybe the money that we're spending in some areas so that we can increase aid. Those are all things that we're kind of working towards in our group right now, but we haven't specifically come up with any groundbreaking ideas yet, but yeah.
Any other questions for?
Did you all have specific ideas of what student needs are and where the budget would be allocated to meet those needs? So I guess my question is what student needs did you all identify and set to allocate resources for?
Well, I'll take that one again, because I'm the student representative on this specific working group. But yeah, we did talk a little bit about the first and second year experience. I mentioned through our discussions that I'm a graduate student here. I did undergrad here in the anthropology department. Hey, Dr. Houle. Yeah, but I didn't feel necessarily super invested in as an undergraduate student until about my junior or senior year, whenever I began getting into the courses for my specific majors. So we talked about how can we really expand that inclusivity, and how can we have those students that are in their first or second year really engage with the institution. What are the services that we can provide them that allow them to actually know the resources that are here and how to actually use them effectively. So we talked about those needs in terms of, that would increase our retention rates anyway, if students actually knew the resources and were able to use them effectively. There are so many resources that are here in different departments that honestly I didn't find out about until maybe my senior year. And that's well past the time I could have actually used some of them. So we talked about a few of those things, making sure that we're a lot more transparent in our processes, making sure that our resources are heavily promoted, and that if we do have resources in one department that aren't being utilized, but they're being utilized in another one, how can we collaborate and make sure that the resources are being used across campus and not just in specific areas?
Okay, anything else? We'll move down. So we have I'm going to get your names right. Student success and experience. Any questions for SSE?
There is something on the poster saying that we should be making promises to students that we can't keep. So my question is, what general promises are we making to students now that we aren't keeping?
Lots.
So if we're promising students a engaged experience where they're part of a WKU community and they come in and have the experience that the student had that we just heard from in their first or second year, we're selling them a false bill of goods. It's not really what we're offering. And so our discussion sort of centered around that. How can we create this meaningful first year, second year experience that transitions students into their third and fourth year? We also spend a lot of time talking about the whole student experience, getting students thinking about WKU in middle school and in high school, and getting them here and giving them this amazing experience. And then when they become alumni, we don't lose them. They come back and help our current students. And so creating this sort of life cycle over the life course of a WKU experience.
Anybody else?
My question is to student success, but it may also be academic innovation. Have you had any discussion at all in Bold New Ideas about a different kind of first-year experience that isn't Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, course organized?
We've talked a lot about having a first-year experience. We have a first-year seminar that is an elective. 600 students in an academic year take it. And so we've talked about having a meaningful first-year experience. But we also have to be mindful they can't get through the first year and then we forget about them in their second year. This has to be something that binds them to the institution and keeps them moving forward.
We also discussed looking at the academic year, starting earlier in August, having finals week right after Thanksgiving, then doing the winter term before Thanksgiving, then during the 3-week term, students coming back, classes starting again in January, 2nd or 3rd.
And I just wanted to dovetail on what you had said about that your experience, and we've talked a lot about that. How do we get students engaged? And so we talked about like work studies. Can we put all of our, can we give all of our incoming freshmen student worker jobs? Or we wanted to talk, Jerry touched on this, mentoring program. Maybe it's with alumni. Maybe it's all sophomores are connected to a faculty member or a staff member, or maybe alumni, or maybe it's a peer mentoring program, but where they have a mentoring coach type relationship. What are some of the other things we talked about that were sort of, you need resources to do that. I mean, we're thinking lots of really great, like every student has a shared applied learning / research experience. We send every student on a study abroad, study away, or maybe a local travel type experience. And we were thinking, I think we're thinking pretty big, but the resources have to be there.
We talked about leveraging Colonnade a little bit more deliberately and intentionally, in those first-year classes, in communication studies and English, for example, and those other classes to try to use those as, they take those courses anyway, unless they're getting dual credit or something like that. And so that could be a way to try to more deliberately engage them.
We also talked about that every student after their first year should have a career plan so they know what they're going to be working towards and what experiences they can have to make sure that they're ready for that. A financial plan so they're not planning semester to semester, but we talk about how they're going to pay for their entire experience. And then what was the other one? An academic plan that you're planning out and charting your experience the entire time, but all students would have that in their first year.
Andy, do you have a question?
I do have a question. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. So when you reference reorganization, you specifically mention silos and sandboxes and/or territories. So could you give an example of this reorganization strategy if it's yet been established?
So we sort of are going to kick the can or punt in terms of what the reorganization should look like. But WKU, through its budgeting and how we've done things for a long time, the way we see it is you got the resources last year that you're going to get this year. And what it does is it breeds this, I'm going to set up programming inside my unit that might benefit students, and I'm going to use my budget dollars, and someone else on the other side of campus is doing the same thing. There's a loss of efficiency, there's really no collaboration, and it just leads to all of these redundancies. And so our budget model fuels the silos.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to the last group. So the last one, Alicia will get the mic to the group, is research, scholarship, and creative activity. Any questions for that group? Going once. Come on, someone's got to have a question for research, scholarship, and creative activity.
Okay, so I'm an international student, and I went to Berea College where they kind of like paid for everything. Like they paid for everything. SAT, no sorry, GMAT, GRE. If you have an interview, they would pay for everything. So when I came here and I got a graduate assistantship. Typically, you know, graduate assistantships, they're like, you know, they'll waive your tuition. So I guess what incentive or, I don't know, like, what does the committee there have to offer? Because I almost didn't come here because I didn't have the funding. And we're in, I guess, I don't know if this is the Appalachia region but we have, you know, the low income students here, but it's more highly priced, so if you're going to say more.
Yes, this is actually not something that I don't think we as a committee really talked about it a lot of graduate students, but I think all of us were sort of, I think probably a lot of us were thinking about it, but it just didn't really come up because folks weren't undergraduates. But I would agree with you completely that if we're committed to graduate education here, that we have to put resources into graduate education, and that includes support for graduate students. So, you know, you put your money in the things that you value, and one of those might be graduate education. But you're right, that is a kind of resource we have to decide if we're going to do, because I think almost everybody who's involved with graduate education would agree that it's inadequate right now. I wish I could say it's going to happen, but I don't have a big purse, so I can't do it.
I have a question. Nobody's talked about Carnegie classification and if we're happy being a Master's 1 and what does a Master's 1 Carnegie classification mean, and how does that define who we are?
I think that's a great question, and that's actually not, we didn't talk explicitly about Carnegie classifications. I mean, when it came up was basically, we're not in R1 and we're not going to be in R1. Okay, right, we know that, but what will we be then, and what does that mean in terms of are we happy with a particular classification that we've got? I think that's a great question, and we'll talk about it at our next meeting.
Do you want to follow up?
So in regards to research, one of the things that we did talk about here was that with the PhD students, for example, here, well, compared to, say, University of Kentucky, where they have graduate students teaching the undergraduate classes, and here it's more of the professors or the tenure professors that teach the classes. Do you see that as a problem where I guess the PhD students don't have as much experience if they want to go into the academia field and they're having that opportunity to teach those classes?
Well, we don't have PhD students here. I mean, we do have doctoral level students, but we don't have PhD level students. So I don't, I mean, I would, okay, I'm going to speak just, this is my thought now, doesn't necessarily represent the committee, which is I don't see us moving towards a model where we're doing that, where we're having graduate students teaching undergraduates at the same level that someplace like University of Kentucky would. I think the committee would agree with me, that's not something that we're moving towards. I don't think the university would want to move towards that, because I think we feel very committed to the idea that our research model should be supporting undergraduate education, master's level education in terms of the research, scholarship, and creative activities that we have going on. So I hope the rest of the committee would agree with me on that.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here. We have 2 more things that we're going to try to do in 20 minutes. I think we can do it. Actually, you guys are so good. One of the things is we need to decide, next week is the last full week of classes before Thanksgiving, and then after that we have a week, and then we come back and we do this all again, and we're all going to be further down the road by then. So we need to know, other than us having an open forum on the 16th, which will happen, and Paul and I will be running that, and we invite everyone here to come to it, but is there anything your group needs from the community in terms from Tuesday, in terms of data, from any type of Qualtrics survey, anything like that? Is there anything your group needs from the greater WKU community next week? Because we'd like to coordinate that. If multiple groups have something like, we'd like to run a survey, we'd like to do that. We'd like to do one survey, not 5 of them. So if you can talk about that within your group for a couple of minutes and decide as a working group, is there anything you need? That's one thing. The other thing that we'd like to do, and you can talk about this, is what do you feel now is the big idea, either from your group or that you heard overall? What we'd like to do at the end here to finish up is a short list of the biggest ideas, what you think are either bold or directional or aspirational. We'd like to put that on the board, and it could come directly from your committee or it could come overall, but you heard 10 subgroups talk about it. So 2 things, what do you need next week from us, or the world, if you will, to move your group forward, and what do you find as big aspirational things that we're going to try to focus around? So we'll give you 5 or so minutes to kind of do that within your group, and then we'll go around and wrap up. Okay? Does that help? Somebody does, yeah. Somebody with good handwriting?
Well, it's not perfect about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, do you need something? So somebody with good handwriting. Doctor's handwriting better than
That didn't hurt.
Hey, Bruce, this one might be better.
Yeah, that one might be better.
I can't get the thing to stay on there. Oh.
Oh, on this one?
Yeah.
Oh, won't stay up here?
Yeah, I have a.
Well, you know what? We don't, Paula, they don't need to see that. We just need to write it. We'll use this one for the ideas. We'll use this one for what they need. she also said this could be open for, January. It should be behind that, but in terms of what collecting data for college communities. So I'm sure by January 15th, you'll get them open. So, this doesn't actually say what that is. It was in the chart. Here it is.
Okay.
Yep. We can use. You run this.
Okay.
I'll run the mic to them. You ask them what they need, and then you write it down
Okay.
here. Whatever pen you want.
Okay. Well, I can write it up here and just take the sheet off.
I didn't know if you need to be close to that. It'll work. You want to pull that closer? That work? Okay, we're going to start with what you need, and I'll go around group by group. And then we'll end on big ideas so we can end on a really high note. So you guys ready? This is just the what you need part. Nothing? You're good, okay? So SSE is nothing. What do you guys need?
We would like some sort of feedback mechanism, maybe email or suggestion type box for efficiencies and ideas around that type of thing.
Okay, so has everyone seen the website? Okay, so if you look at the email that went out from Skipper that had the agenda and stuff, if you go on that link, it has a website. On that website, there is a anonymous or non-anonymous, in other words, someone put their name and email or not, input, but it's not targeted right now. So my question is, if you want feedback, do you want to pose a question, or do you want to pose a group question? This committee would like to know this on the website, or do you want a Qualtrics? Let me start with you guys since you brought it up. Ongoing feedback, okay?
Yeah, just two things here. So for the website, the link that has gone out, has that been sent to students? Because I have not received any correspondence via email that includes it. I'm looking at some of my other students here. So if we could maybe send that out to students as well, I think that could be a rich resource that we could tap here. In addition, I think what we want to do is just do an ongoing thing that includes any suggestions that you ever want to give WKU ever about ways to improve or ways to engage students, and that would follow after the strategic planning process has even ended. We would like it to go ongoing.
That's research group.
Okay, maybe I'll talk first and give it up to Dave. We'd like more time because we are not prepared. We do want to solicit through surveys to at least faculty, but would not be ready to do so by next week, and we don't want to do something that would be ineffective at this point. So we would like to put that off until we do have something that's more. I did solicit input from department chairs. Thank you to the 6 who responded. Open-ended solicitations, I found, aren't so good. So we might want to be a little bit more focused, planful, strategic about doing it.
So we are, to echo Kelly's words, we are very interested in feedback
data, if you will, from the university's stakeholders, whether it be students or faculty or staff. We don't, and we've had conversation about that among our committee. We've actually framed some survey type questions that we've got posted out on our Dropbox folder, but we haven't refined those to the degree that we think we have. One of the risks that we run with that is creating an environment of expectation that doesn't happen. So we'd like to, we want to do that. We don't think that the ready, fire thing is the right way to go. We'd like to take a little time to aim and make sure we get the right data. Because similarly, and I was telling our group this, that I've got a meeting on Tuesday morning with a number of corporate leaders from the regional economy where I'm going to be asking them to give us feedback via an assessment tool that comes through an Economic Development Authority. What role does the university play in the local economy? How well do we play it? What should we be doing better? Because one of the things we haven't talked a lot about tonight here, but I think is very important, is what role does WKU have in the regional economy? Because that's a big deal, and that's why some of us are sitting here. So we are interested in further data. We don't think next week is going to happen. Fair enough? One other comment that I would make, too, is that there are 75 people in this room who are very engaged in this process, but there's 2,000 other people at the university, plus all of our students, who have an opportunity, who would have an opportunity through the feedback mechanism of what we're talking about to input to the process. We've done a terrific job here. Well, I don't want to say that. We want this to be an inclusive process, and I think the best way to do that is ask people what their perceptions are, and then we have data to respond to.
Hey, let me ask, I just wanted to be on mic to do it. Do you want this before our December 6th meeting? Do you want to take like the week after Thanksgiving to have, or do you need more time than that?
Well, I appreciate your comments about the academic, calendar, but I don't care about that. I think that it would be far more to execute a well-planned survey in whatever time it happens, rather than execute an ill-planned survey in some kind of other arbitrary timing. Fair enough? My point then, to answer your question, is I don't know when we'd be ready to have that survey. I know when I'm ready to do it for the outside community, but we've got a lot of discussion here about what we want to ask. So perhaps we could have each committee come up with the questions they want to ask, and we do one survey. That's kind of what you're asking.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to start backwards because we're still trying. I am on. Hello. Closer. Hello. So I'm going to start backwards. I'm going to talk about my big idea first, or our big idea first. And it's just this. It's if the group would begin thinking about DEI in your respective working group. What should that be? How do we incorporate DEI principles or practices or philosophy, mindset into everything that we do, whether it's student success, whether it's research, scholarship, and creative ideas, whatever the working group happens to be, how do we incorporate DEI into that? So that's that's our big idea. The other thing, though, as it relates to data, we're still talking about that. And the more we talk, there may be opportunities for us to find what it is that we're looking for in offices that are currently existing and pulling that data. So I'm going to relinquish the mic so that we can continue talking about what it is that we need, and then we may come back, if that's all right.
So do you want to know what we want to know? Okay.
Start with that, and then you're the last group, so then you can flip right over to the big idea.
All right. So we want to know, we'd probably want to do a survey. We're ready. I don't know why you guys aren't ready. We're ready. I'm just kidding. We want to know what is academic excellence for your discipline, and how would you measure academic excellence? We just kind of like to get a broad kind of smear of answers for that to try to generalize maybe. And just to sort of see the distinctive ways people come at that. And let's see, the big thing we came up with was building connections across disciplines between different diverse groups in the university, not just academics, but student life, student success, those kind of things. So interdisciplinarity, it's the affirmative way to talk about taking silos down. That make sense?
Go ahead, big idea from budget.
Well, we started out with our big idea, enrich the lives of every member of the WKU community. And this moves beyond students to include faculty, staff, and the community. That's our big idea.
You guys? Or if it's changed at all through tonight, or if anything's been modified.
All right, well, I guess I'll just read off what our big goal is. WKU fosters an environment in which all faculty and students have an opportunity to engage in scholarship at the highest level in their discipline, to advance the personal and professional development of our students, to raise the scholarly profile of the university, to improve the quality of life in our region, and to support innovation, economic diversification, and entrepreneurship in our region.
So, our big idea is that we need to go talk some more. And we came in with this idea that we have to be a student-centered university. What was our statement? Do you have it printed off? Our bold idea coming in is that at WKU, students are the center of an inclusive, supportive, and personalized learning environment that prepares them to lead successful, productive, and fulfilling lives. We still like that, but we need to talk more about what you all said too. So I'm punting again.
All right. 7:57. That's worth applause, isn't it? I mean, come on. We have another one of these on December 6th. We have an open forum on November 16th in which Paula and I will, and anybody else who wants to share the guillotine, will provide, and the president, I think, will be out of town that day, right? Isn't that what you told me? No? We will share this with the community of anybody who wants to show up. So we will take the summary of what we've gathered from you all today. Anybody that wants to come to help answer questions or whatever, we'll do that. December 6th, we're back here. So we ask you to, again, send Julia your committee meeting times from now till December 6th as you set them, so the steering committee members can again drop in and visit with you. On December 7th, we are having another open forum, possibly two. We're having one right before the Senate meeting, and because that's exam week and some people complained that that was cutting across exam times, we may do one at noon and one at 2:45 just to try to, it doesn't make any sense to do one before December 7th, and that is Pearl Harbor Day, so that's got to be meaningful in some way of why we're going to get bombed and do that. But anyways, and then Friday doesn't sound like a good idea, so. Anybody that wants to come. Yes, it'll be on campus, but off campus people can come. It's open to the community. So yeah, so feel free to invite whoever, hopefully friendly.
DSU. Thursday.
It's 3 o'clock on a week from today. 3 p.m. in DSU, here, right? This is where we're at, right?
We'll send a
I
reminder.
don't know about, is it this room? Auditorium? Oh yeah, it's the little room downstairs, right.
Yes.
Only a few thousand people can show up there.
Are you accommodating the regional campuses?
We will try to do that through Pony Express. No, yes, I presume we can do that. So we will certainly try to do that. Yep, that would be our intention. So we are done for the night. If we can have a round of applause for all the people that helped set this up. If the co-chairs would stay with the steering committee for just a little bit so we can just cover a few things, we'll try to be quick. Thank you all.
Thanks. Have a great night.